Some of the most dangerous thoughts you have do not arrive looking dangerous. They show up sounding reasonable, familiar, even protective. And that's the problem, because when your mind hands you a sentence in the voice of certainty, you usually don't stop and inspect it. You obey it. You organize around it. You start building your day around something that may not even be true. And most people never catch the moment that happens. They just know this. They keep hesitating, keep looping, keep shrinking, keep feeling pushed around by something they cannot quite name. And what looked like just a thought starts to reveal itself as something else entirely. Welcome to MindLit Labs. I'm David Cook. Cognitive diffusion is a concept from acceptance and commitment therapy developed by psychologist Stephen Hayes. At its core, cognitive diffusion is the skill of loosening the grip of a thought by seeing it as a thought. And that is the key thing to understand. It's not a prophecy, an order, and it's not your identity. It's just words, images, and statements your mind produced, mental events passing through awareness. And to be precise, a few closely related moves are happening here. First, you notice the thought. That's meta-awareness. Then you step back and recognize it as a mental event, not reality. That's decentering. And then the thought begins to lose some of its power to steer your behavior. That's diffusion. Different traditions use different language for this, but for our purposes, diffusion is the larger, practical shift people are usually reaching for. And that may sound small, but it is not small. Because the moment you stop treating every thought like reality, you create a gap between what shows up in your mind and what you do next. And inside that gap, those three things are happening. You notice the thought, you step back from the thought, and you stop letting the thought act like your commander. That gap is where freedom starts. Now, contrary to what a lot of people assume, diffusion is not replacing bad thoughts with good thoughts. It's not winning an argument in your head, and it is definitely not forcing a thought out by brute strength and willpower. Believe me, a lot of people are doing psychological cage matches with their own minds all day long and then wondering why they feel exhausted. Diffusion takes a different route. You don't wrestle the thought, you change your relationship to the thought. And that's what this really means. You don't have to make a thought disappear in order to stop letting it run the show. That is why this matters. The goal is not to erase the thought. The goal is to change your relationship to the thought enough that it stops managing your behavior. And here is the truth no one ever taught us. You are not your thoughts. You are the one observing them. Now let's talk about when a thought feels like reality. We'll start by defining the opposite. The opposite of cognitive diffusion is cognitive fusion. In fusion, we become entangled with our thoughts. They feel literal, authoritative, factual, defining. It no longer feels like my mind is saying something. It feels like this is reality. And that is where people get trapped. Because language is potent. Sometimes a sentence shows up and your system reacts as if the event has already occurred. Let me give you an example. You're about to send a message. Nothing dramatic, just a normal message. And then the thought shows up. I'm going to sound stupid if I send this. Now in fusion, that does not feel like a sentence. That feels like a 4-alarm warning siren. So you rewrite the message, then you reread it, then you trim it, then you stall. Then maybe you don't send it at all. Not because you made some clean, rational decision, but because you accepted the alert as fact. Now, Diffusion begins with a very small shift, and it sounds something like this. I'm having the thought that I'm going to sound stupid. Same content, different stance. You're not denying the thought. You're not debating the thought. You're noticing the thought. That first move is called meta-awareness. You're catching the mind in the act. And then something else happens. You're no longer standing inside the thought as if it were the whole room. You're looking at it. That is the beginning of decentering. Remember what we said a moment ago. You are not your thoughts. You are the one observing them. And that is when choice starts to come back online. Because once you can see the thought, you can see that you are not identical to the thought. The thought starts losing leverage. And that is the doorway to diffusion. Now here is one of the most important ideas in this entire video. A lot of the work is not about changing the content of a thought. It's about changing the function of the thought. In other words, what does this thought make you do next? Does it move you toward what matters, or does it pull you into loops? And that's the question, because when you treat a thought as literal truth, it tends to dictate behavior. But when you treat a thought as a passing mental event, like leaves floating down a stream just passing by, it has less leverage. So imagine this. You wake up and the thought shows up, I'll start that project tomorrow. Sounds harmless, perhaps even reasonable. But a lot of lives get quietly dismantled by reasonable sounding delay scripts. That thought is not a moral failure, it's not a diagnosis, it's a script. In fusion, you obey it. In diffusion, you name it, you see it, you step back from it. And because of that, it doesn't get to operate with the same authority. Say to yourself, there's that delay script again, and then you take the smallest next step anyway. Not a heroic step, not a dramatic reinvention, a 2-minute step. Because diffusion is not about feeling ready. It's about refusing to let ready become the gatekeeper of your life. Let me say that differently. Diffusion doesn't make you fearless. It makes you less controllable. Now, we need a credibility point here because a lot of people still think that mental strength means forcing thoughts out of consciousness. And it turns out that is often backwards. When you try to shove a thought away, especially under stress or cognitive load, it often comes back harder. Why? Because the mind has to keep checking whether the thought is still there. So the command, don't think that, keeps the whole system oriented toward the very thing you're trying to escape. And that's the trap. Diffusion is not get rid of the thought. Diffusion is stop feeding the thought. Stop clicking it, obeying it. Stop building your day around it. Let your thought be present, but you choose your next move anyway. That's not weakness. That's skill. Now, from a theological perspective, Scripture has never treated every thought as trustworthy. We've discussed this before. In fact, it assumes the opposite, that what shows up in your mind is not automatically aligned with truth. Proverbs 3 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." That is a striking instruction because it implies something most people miss. Your immediate interpretation, your internal sense of certainty is not always reliable. Now think about that in light of what we've been discussing. In cognitive fusion, a thought shows up. It feels like truth. It feels certain. It feels convincing. It feels like something you should act on. But Scripture keeps introducing a pause, a space, a moment of evaluation. Take notice of what you are thinking and evaluate it against the truth of God. Proverbs 14 says, "The simple believe everything, but the prudent gives thought to his steps." Not everything that presents itself as truth deserves agreement. Psalms 19 says, "Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord." Thoughts are not treated as automatically trustworthy. They are something to be examined, something to be brought into the light. And that aligns directly with what we've been talking about. Because the moment you stop assuming that every thought is true, you create space for something else: discernment, clarity, truth. Now remember, this does not mean suppressing thought. It means evaluating it, interrogating it, refusing to let it operate unchecked. So from a faith perspective, this idea is not new. The mind has always been a place that requires guidance. Not every thought is truth, not every thought is from God, and not every thought deserves control over your life. And once you understand that, you begin to relate to your thoughts differently. So let's recap. What we've uncovered is this. First, most of the thoughts that shape your behavior do not feel like thoughts. They feel like reality. Secondly, when that happens, you don't question them. You organize your life around them. You obey them. Third, cognitive diffusion consists of 3 simple but powerful shifts, and they all involve seeing a thought as a thought. Meta-awareness is noticing the thought. Decentering is stepping back from it, and diffusion is the process of loosening its grip. And fourth, understanding that you are not your thoughts. You're the one observing them. But that raises the real question. If you stop obeying your thoughts automatically, what do you do instead? Well, what is one thought you tend to automatically accept as true without ever stopping to examine it? Not the loudest thought, not the most dramatic one, the quiet one you organize your behavior around. See if you can catch it today in real time and just notice it. Don't act on it and don't try to change it. Just notice the thought and then take the next step in the desired direction. If this helped you start seeing how your thoughts shape your behavior in ways you may not have noticed before, share it with someone who might be feeling stuck, looping, or pushed around by their own thinking. Because sometimes the most powerful shift is simply seeing what has been there all along. In part 2, I'm going to show you exactly how to do this in real time. Practical tools, simple techniques, and one decision rule that can immediately change how you respond to your thoughts. Because understanding the mechanism is one thing, but applying it is where your life actually changes. Thank you for watching, and remember, stay aware, stay curious, stay compassionate, and always keep your mind lit. Take care, God bless, and I'll see you in the next video.
Thanks for joining us today. Be sure to comment, like, subscribe, and follow MindLit Labs, where we explore the convergence of mind, meaning, and faith. Our goal is to help you to think deeper, live wiser, and stay grounded in what's true, good, and beautiful.